All right, YouTube, this Detroit's HPTV coming to you out of Detroit, back with another video. Man, it has been a very interesting week in politics. You've got New York going socialist. You got Elon Musk and Trump still going at it. And you got the Democrats in a free fall. Now, one thing about the liberals on the left, they will throw you under the bus. After they have no longer use for you, they'll throw you under the bus. And that's what they're doing to these illegal immigrants. Now, the very controversial thing now is Alligator Alcatraz. I didn't know much about it till one of my subscribers asked me what I thought about it in the comments. So I told him that I would do something on it after I did a little research and found out what Alligator Alcatraz is. Alligator Alcatraz is a detention camp for immigrants down in the Florida Everglades. Now, I must say, after looking into this, this has to be the most dangerous prison or camp I've ever heard of. I'm talking about alligators, water moccasins. But I'm gonna let you see for yourself. And you tell me what you think. If you were an immigrant, would you self-deport yourself, or would you wait around and possibly end up in Alligator Alcatraz? Now, I want you to think about this question after you see the video. Would you self-deport, or would you risk going to this prison? Now, I'm finna show you the clip, and I want you to look at all the things that could possibly happen to you at Alligator Alcatraz. It's a long list of things to deal with if you go there. So without further ado, this is for education and commentary under the 1976 Copyright Act. Let's look at Alligator Alcatraz.
All right, welcome back in here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andy Mack. Earlier on today, President Trump visited a very controversial new migrant detention facility in the Florida Everglades. He was flanked by DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, the Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, amongst others. Let's take you right now out to Caroline Shively with this report of the tour there in South Florida.
President Trump touring Alligator Alcatraz Tuesday, a new migrant detention center near the Florida Everglades.
We're surrounded by miles of treacherous swampland, and the only way out is really deportation.
The 3,000-bed state facility will be the largest in the country, right next to an airstrip, with Florida National Guard members deputized as immigration judges.
They come here, say they already or been ordered to be deported. You drive them 2,000 feet to the runway, and then they're gone. It's a one-stop shop.
The detention center is in the Big Cypress National Preserve, home to alligators, water moccasins, and Burmese pythons. The president has suggested the local wildlife will discourage any escapes. Not so, say some protesters trying to protect the Everglades.
This is not a scary place. The alligators and the pythons will not be security guards. They are absolutely terrified of people.
Now, I want you to think about how they saying that the alligators and the pythons won't be security. That's what he's saying. But watch.
Good for the water, it's not good for the wildlife and the habitats.
Illegal border crossings have plummeted under the Trump administration, and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says the tough federal stance is leading to an increase in self-deportations.
We believe it's over 1 million, possibly more than that.
A Fox News poll released Monday finds that 67% of Americans are concerned about illegal immigration, but a separate Fox survey says 53% think the administration has gone too far in its enforcement. In Washington, Caroline Shively, Fox News.
All right, thank you so much. And it is a new concept expected to open this month into July, and you can look right now live there at the Everglades in South Florida, courtesy of our Earth Camp partners. As you can see, the sun setting on this region. region after President Trump visiting this, talking about immigration and much more. And we also saw more from the DHS, from Homeland Security on social media as well, as they posted this AI-generated image of those alligators, talking about Alligator, Alcatraz, wearing the immigration and customs enforcement hats. Let's take you out to a conversation I had, a very interesting one, talking about the wildlife, exactly talking about that and what it means for this area, what's it all about, what might be lurking there in the swamps. Let's listen into this. In here to Live Now from Fox, I'm Andy Mack. Casually called Alligator Alcatraz, the controversial temporary migrant detention facility will open this month in July in the Florida Everglades, and it's surrounded by those natural barriers, surrounded by swamps filled with alligators, pythons, and other dangerous creatures. As they made this announcement, President Trump was on the ground in the Florida Everglades in this remote region. You can see some of that terrain there is very dangerous, and much like the Alcatraz in San Francisco, this facility also has a natural barrier around it. Let's continue this conversation and dive into some of the wildlife. We're going to be joined right now by global wildlife expert, a TV host, conservationist, Forrest Galante. Thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. And it's called Alligator Alcatraz. What kind of dangers, what kind of wildlife is out there in the Florida Everglades?
Is that Everglades ecosystem, but it's not an area to be taken lightly. I mean, in addition to alligators, there are much scarier American crocodiles, the invasive Burmese pythons, there's diamondback rattlesnakes, cottonmouths, mountain lions, black bears, snapping turtles. Believe it or not, there's even bull sharks that will roam into the Everglades. So there is a plethora of wild predators that actually will sort of protect and insulate or keep people at least from escaping from this Alcatraz, and that's before you talk about the crazy heat and the inclement weather that Florida has. I mean, it really is a sort of an island over there.
And can we talk about it? Can you listed off all those predators out there? How do they all fit? How do they coexist in this environment?
Your iPhone 16 needs this mouse case.
Well, because the Everglades is such an incredible wetland and vibrant ecosystem, it's able to support an amazing abundance of life. And so that includes small prey animals, mesopredators like raccoons and possums, and then that feeds the entire foundation for all of these larger predators. Now, a lot of those are native, like the alligators and the rattlesnakes, but then you add in things like the Burmese pythons, recent evidence that more and more bull sharks have been moving into the Everglades, and you just have this sort of perfect storm of American predators all in one location that makes it unbelievable. And all those things are hungry because they're all competing for food. So it's not a great place to go wandering around.
No, it is not. And so many teeth, so much venom is in there. Can we talk about the alligators first? Because there are obviously the American alligator, different kind of parts of the alligator. Can you talk specifically about what the alligator brings? Because we know it's been around for millions of years growing. How big can they be? How long have they been around? And how have they really adapted to be this predator that they are?
Yeah, I mean, there are reports of alligators getting up to 20 feet. More realistically, they get up to about 13 or 14 feet. They can weigh upwards of nearly 1,000 pounds, so they can be big, heavy predators. They have an incredible jaw pressure of around 2,000 psi, and when they bite, like most crocodilians, they latch down and they go into a death roll. And so if you're bitten by one, the way that they actually kill you is not with that size, it's not with that force or those incredible teeth. It's from that roll, which actually rips limb from body. And so it's a very brutal way to go. So if you ever are bitten by an alligator, make sure you roll with it, because that is the sort of finishing move that they have to take out any prey species, and that includes an unlucky human being.
Yeah, and of course, you can see some of them in the water on land. How can they adapt to be in both places? Because I know they get on the land because they have to, they're cold-blooded, they do these sorts of things. How do they work both in water and on land?
Yeah, well, as ectothermic reptiles, they require moving out on land in order to use the sun for energy. However, they're aquatic by nature. They're an ambush predator that lives in the water and will ambush things by being incredibly stealthy and silent and moving under the water. So they've really filled this incredible ecological niche of a predator that is very well suited to being in water and on land, and that is what has made them the apex predator of the Everglades for millions of years, as you pointed out.
Yeah, and talking about reptiles, let's move over to snakes, because we know, talking about pythons and different venomous snakes on the ground, what types exist in the Everglades? How big can they get?
Yeah, I mean, there are the native species like your cottonmouth, your eastern diamondback rattlesnake, your pygmy rattlesnake, and then the one that everybody's talking about is the invasive Burmese python, which was brought in for the pet trade. A storm broke down, at least is the common belief, and released those animals. Now they've gone rampant in the Everglades. There's estimated to be somewhere upwards of 500,000, 300,000 or so Burmese pythons living in the Florida Everglades. Now, that's a nice one that you're seeing on screen there, but they can get to nearly 20 feet long and weigh hundreds of pounds. So, you know, they're a big snake, 250 pounds or so they can weigh up to. So they are a pretty deadly predator. And in certain parts of the world, like the Philippines, there actually have been documented killing and eating people. So they just add to this whole thing. And that's before we even talk about the mammals, right? Then we've got bears, we've got mountain lions, the weather, as we mentioned, bull sharks that have been moving in. There are just so many incredible creatures in the Everglades.
Yeah, that is so very impressive. You won't want to come across anything like that. You wouldn't want to come across anything
well, you
like
wouldn't,
that.
Andy. You wouldn't. I'd love to. I'd love to go trek through the Everglades and try and survive from Alcatraz. I think that would be incredible.
Let's talk about that, because as you mentioned, just the surrounding there, it is a very remote location. You talk about some of the animals, some of the wildlife, but just talk about the environment, the terrain, the swamp. How dangerous is just that?
Extremely. You know, first of all, getting lost is incredibly likely. You cannot drink that water, so dehydration in that hot Florida sun is a high risk. The weather is very unpredictable across the Everglades. That's what makes it a wetland, right? Thunderstorms, heat and humidity, potential hurricanes, lightning storms, flooding, there's fires. In addition to all of that, you have some of the worst insects on the planet, toxic stinging plants, biting mosquitoes, ants that are absolutely terrible. And so if you were to actually get out of Alcatraz, you're then standing in nipple-deep mud with water overhead, alligators around, all of these things that I just mentioned that can kill you from exposure, all these things that can kill you as predators. I mean, it really is a fantastic isolationist location, because getting out from there on foot.
I know what I love when my dog food is shipped directly to my front door. And for the last 2 years, I've had this because
for most people is practically impossible.
And can I ask you, because it's aptly named Alcatraz because of what is going on in San Francisco, everyone knows the rock that is out there. Which one is more difficult to try to get out from? Would it be the Alcatraz of San Francisco or the Alcatraz of Florida?
In today's modern world, with white shark populations where they are, which is the inhibitor in the San Francisco and Alcatraz, I would say that your likelihood of surviving the swim from Alcatraz and San Francisco to the mainland is greater than surviving escaping Alligator Alcatraz.
All right, very good. I just wanted to get you about that. We talk about alligators, different animals like this. Is it the smaller creatures, kind of like you mentioned, with some of the mosquitoes, some of the bugs? Could that really be the most dangerous part? Is that fair?
I think the most dangerous part when it comes to those insects is actually the mental degradation that would take place. When you're being bitten by tens of thousands of mosquitoes, all constantly, all the time, the frustration, what you're feeling, then you add the heat stroke, and you add the bad weather, all of these things compound in a survival situation to leading to you making poor decisions like, oh, I'll just swim across this murky pool, or let's just take this shortcut because I'm so frustrated. I've been so mentally degraded from going through these difficult conditions. And it's those poor decisions that then lead to the negative encounter with a predator that can be life-ending. So it's sort of a combination of factors. When you compare that to, say, San Francisco, it's like, well, can I make the swim? It's going to be cold. There may be a great white shark. but that's not as many compounding factors as you're facing with the Alligator Alcatraz.
Yeah, the mental kind of load of all of that and trying to figure out how to do it would be very taxing. You've traveled around the world. You've seen different environments, and the Florida Everglades are certainly unique. Does it compare to anywhere else, and how similar would it be to in Australia in terms of the predators, in terms of Africa with different types of predators? What would you compare it to?
It's a great question. I mean, there are some incredible wetlands across the planet, you know, the Okavango Delta, the Pantanal in South America. But when you look at all of them, they're all ecologically very different based on the megafauna and the creatures around. Candidly and honestly, if you built this in the middle of the Okavango in Africa, you'd never ever survive it. Whereas Alligator Alcatraz, with the right amount of knowledge, you may be able to survive it. So Africa is the most dangerous. I would say this comes second, and after that, you know, is everything else. But this ecosystem, this Florida ecosystem, has the extremity of the weather that adds to it more so than any of those other locations.
And to kind of continue with that theme, you've been known to kind of get out there in the wild, discovering the yellow caiman, searching for the Tasmanian tiger. Is there anything in the Florida Everglades that we don't know about? Is there an unknown creature potentially lurking?
I wouldn't be surprised if there were a handful of undescribed species in the Everglades. Now, they're not going to be large predators. They're going to be small things like snakes and frogs that we haven't identified to date. And there are lost species like the South Florida rainbow snake, which has been missing for over 100 years, that I believe is still extant in that ecosystem. And it's because the ecosystem is so vast, it's so protected by all these factors that we've discussed here today, that things are able to hide in these swamps going undetected by people, because frankly, people can't spend a lot of time in this environment.
Yeah, and I would give you the floor because I know you are searching for all these different animals, extinct or not extinct, new, recently discovered. Anything else for you that's really you're looking forward to in your explorations?
You know, I actually find this Alligator Alcatraz so intriguing because I don't know that anybody has tried to survive with nothing from the heart of the Everglades like that. And of everything that's coming up, I've found this from an ecological standpoint to be very, very interesting. I'd actually love to get down there and try and make that escape route and see what actually happens to someone who has extensive survival and wildlife knowledge in that environment, because I candidly don't know the answer as to whether or not it's actually possible.
Yeah, that's so very true. And we know there are swims from Alcatraz in.
So, wow. What do you think? Would you self-deport? Would you run the risk of ending up at Alligator Alcatraz? The Democrats, they up in arms and saying it's inhumane. But with the protesting by immigrants and the waving of their flags, it seems like they're forcing Trump to constantly keep upping the ante, you know. And one thing we have to know about this administration, they don't be bluffing when they get ready to do something. So you got to ask yourself, would you as an immigrant, knowing what's waiting or the possibilities of ending up there, would you self-deport? I just want to know, would you leave on your own, or would you run the risk of going there? Let me know in the chats. This is Detroit's HPTV coming to you out of Detroit. We're going to end this video, and I hope this has answered all your questions, if you had any, about what is Alligator Alcatraz. Signing out. Peace. Keep your head on the swivel. Like, share, and subscribe.